Today's section of notes, we're going to be looking at the history and government of South Asia. We're going to start with the early history and the ancient river valley civilization of the Indus River Valley civilization that developed. Then we're going to look at the two great religions, even though there are more than two religions in this area, which you will see. There's two major religions of Hinduism and Buddhism that we're going to focus on. And then we're going to look at the different invasions and empires that came. We won't spend a whole lot of time on that. The area that we're really going to focus on is when Great Britain came over and how they colonized the area and how they developed the modern South Asia. Hope you enjoy. History and government. First aspect of this I want to look at is the early history. And we're going to focus on the Indus Valley civilization, which is what this picture shows. Around 2500 BC, one of the world's great civilizations arose in the Indus River Valley. And you can see that kind of shaded here in red. This is the location of the ancient Indus River Valley. The culture that developed here developed a written system, a writing system. They had a strong central government, and they had a thriving overseas trade that they built up. People built what would have been the world's first cities at Mohenjo-Daro, which you can see that there on the left. One of the world's very first cities was located here at Mohenjo-Daro. Now the Aryans. As the Indus Valley civilization crumbled, a group of hunters and herders entered the region from the northwest. They came through this Khyber Pass region, which you can see here, and they began settling down and farming in this area. They left behind sacred writings called the Vedas, and the Vedas is a system of writings that were later used in some of the religions that were found here. This group of people of the Aryans had a very complex social structure that they developed, which we will also see here in just a little bit, that lasted for hundreds of years and is really still around today. All right, now we're going to look at the two great religions, and we're definitely going to come back to the religions later on in the notes. But right now we're going to look at the two great religions. You can see on the map there at the right that for the most part, Hinduism is the most prominent religion, and then the next is actually Buddhism. This map is kind of showing Jainism, which is more of a traditional type of religion, but we're going to focus on Hinduism and Buddhism. First off, we're going to look at Hinduism. Hinduism, as you can see from the picture here on the left, is very, very polytheistic. Hinduism grew out of the Aryan culture and the Aryan religion, and they grew out of the Aryan Vedas, which was the sacred writings that we talked about just a second ago. Hindu belief requires that every person carry out his or her dharma, or moral duty. The dharma is how you're supposed to live your life. After death, people in Hinduism undergo reincarnation, or rebirth as another living being. At the point that somebody finally overcomes all of their earthly desires, they leave this cycle of rebirth and become reunited with the eternal being. In the law of karma, good deeds, activities in accordance with one's dharma, move one towards the point of this endless cycle, while bad deeds chain a person to the endless cycle of rebirth. You've probably heard the phrase karma before, with the idea of what goes around comes around. Well, that idea comes from Hinduism, and how you live your life today will affect how you come back to life in reincarnation, in this endless cycle. And we'll come back to Hinduism later on in another section of the notes. And the second great faith that we're going to talk about right now is Buddhism. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, who was born around 563 BC. He lived a life of luxury, but he struggled with the amount of poor people that was around him, even though he was living such a lavish lifestyle. After years of meditation, he became known as the Buddha, or the Awakened One. He taught that people suffer because they are too attached to material things which are temporary, and they should give that up for the greater good of society. By following Buddhist teachings, people could become enlightened, entering a state of insight, calm, and joy, which was called nirvana. This is not the rock band Nirvana that you probably are thinking of. This is a state of peace that one reaches in Buddhism. One thing I want to point out in Buddhism is that there are no gods. The Buddha statue that you see here is not a statue of Siddhartha Gautama. In several places, like in China, they have statues of the obese Buddha because for them, that representation shows contentment, it shows delight, and it shows joy, which is kind of what Buddhism is teaching and trying to get you to become and to embrace. You can see Buddhist location in the picture on the right, mainly in the northern areas and some of these mountains in Tibet region, and then eastern Bangladesh. For the most part, Buddhism has now moved into some of the other Eastern Asian countries, even though it was developed here in India. What that sound is, first question for Quiz O'Clock. Number 1, identify the most prominent religion in this region, and then briefly describe that religion to me. Moving on to invasions and empires. After the Aryan people died away, the Mauryan Empire invaded through the Khyber Pass, this region between the mountain ranges, which is kind of a flat area. And the Mauryan Empire maintained control from 320 to 180 BC. 500 years later, the Gupta Empire came into power. Muslim missionaries and traders first entered India in the 700s, and by the 1100s, Muslim armies from Mongolia, Turkey, and Persia had conquered northern India in the Khyber region, which we'll talk about that in some of the later notes. The final invaders were the Europeans. They came by the sea. Portuguese traders arrived first in 1500, and they were followed shortly by the British and the French. Though Portuguese strongholds remained, the British were the major European power in Southeast Asia. The British called their Indian empire the Raj. The Raj stood for the Hindu word for empire. The British introduced the English language. They restructured the educational system, they built railroads, and they developed civil services within India. British influence is still seen in the culture of this region today. So when you think of the British invading India, it's not like how they treated the Sub-Saharan Africans. Remember, they treated the Sub-Saharan Africans as inferior. In India, they still did not look highly upon the Indian culture, but they at least respected it a little bit, respected it enough to help benefit the country once they finally left. You'll notice the British India included some of the countries which we now consider separate parts of South Asia, like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. Some of these areas, the British split up based off of religious differences. And we'll get to those religious differences, which are Islam, if you're wanting to get ahead. We'll get to those later in the culture section. But modern South Asia, independence. In the early and mid-1900s, India's fight for independence from Great Britain was led by Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi used non-violent methods such as boycotting British products and staging peaceful demonstrations. In 1947, Britain finally granted independence to British India, and the land became two new countries. Areas with a Hindu majority became India, and those with a Muslim majority became Pakistan. Some of the regional conflicts. There's a region of northern India called the Kashmere Region. The Kashmere region of northern India has a lot of conflict because people in this region are still predominantly Muslim despite being in a predominantly Hindu country of India. So this point, Kashmir, is a conflicted area even today. When you see the word cashmere, you're probably thinking, I've heard that word before, from the cashmere sweaters. The cashmere sweaters come from cashmere sheep, which are found in this region. Get my map back up for you. Today's governments in South Asia are very diverse. India today has one of the world's largest democracies because they have more people than anywhere else in the world. Pakistan has a parliamentary republic, taking after a lot of what Britain did. Pakistan still has instability, and for the most part, military rule still prevails in Pakistan because of terrorism and the Islamic faith. But officially, they have a parliamentary republic. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh also have a parliamentary republic type of government system. Bhutan and Nepal both have monarchies. They're trying to modernize their government systems, and they're also trying to keep the powers of the monarchies in place. All of these systems of government reflect British ideas on government. They all have different elements of how the British influenced the government systems. Your last question, which is your second question. Contrast the difference between British colonization of India versus British colonization of Sub-Saharan Africa.